spend a lot of time on the HyperFast Wealth Show teaching our listeners and viewers a lot about investing in real estate. Well, today, we're going to teach you how to invest in a lot of other things. Our guest today has spent time in the private equity world with large corporations. She has been a major player in the cannabis industry and is now teaching entrepreneurs how to acquire small businesses. She is a contrarian thinker and she is amazing. Welcome to the show, Codie Sanchez. All right, welcome to the show, Codie. How are you doing today?
Life's good, man. Thanks for having me.
And where you're broadcasting from California, right?
I am. I'm in San Diego today. It's beautiful outside.
Awesome. Well, we've got a lot of interesting stuff I know that we're going to talk about today. Cannabis, what you're doing to help entrepreneurs buy businesses, which I think, and I know you do as well, is something this country needs right now. So I'm excited to talk about that. Before we jump into all that great stuff, though, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers out there a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are right now?
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think the interesting part that, like you mentioned, is I've always looked for ways to use capitalism and commerce for some type of contribution. And so I've never really been a big believer in, purely giving, saying that somebody else needs me in order to succeed. Instead, I'm like, let me help enable you to grow and to succeed and to make a ton of money or whatever your life goals are. And then we all have like kind of this virtuous circle. So that's why I'm excited about the small business buying thing, because it's stuff that I'm actually ticked off that I didn't know, over the last 15, 14 years being in private equity and alternatives and investing, that I should have applied to buying my own businesses as opposed to building other people's big businesses. So anyway, I think my whole entire career has been that. It's been like, I figure out some sort of code that, there's some insiders that know it, and I figure it out and I figure out how to apply it somewhere else. And so, I think I told you this story, but I started off as a human trafficking and drug smuggling journalist. And so I was covering these really horrific incidences in Mexico in towns like Juarez and Agua Prieta and Tijuana. And what I realized pretty quickly, my last name's Sanchez, is like, the Sanchez that lived down there had a very different life than the Sanchez that is Codie here in California today. And I remember thinking, Dan, like, why do I have all this opportunity? And can I like build the life that I want? And these guys and gals can't. And what I realized at the time, and I was a senior in college when this happened. I took my senior year and did in my honors thesis on going south of the border and writing about this stuff. And I realized like the only real difference is money. It's that I have an ability to have different socioeconomics than these guys do. And I understand this language of currency or money maybe better than they do. And so my life looks a lot different than theirs. And when I realized that, I thought, well, I need to understand this thing that is money, because I came from a family that, we were fine, but we didn't really have all that. My dad didn't get to go to college, came from immigrants and the American story, right? And so I thought I better go understand this. And I finagled my way into Vanguard, which is one of the largest asset managers, into their accelerated development program. Then I went to Goldman, where I worked in their alternatives and their investment group. Did that about 2007, 2008, so awesome timing on my behalf. And then I went to State Street to build out their institutional business. And then from State Street, I started looking at their business and I was like, you guys should be doing some more stuff in Latin America and you're not. Let me go run it. I'll do my job and I'll do this job, but you need somebody to build that. So they let me do that. It was pretty successful to the tune of billions. So I left to a new company called First Trust, where I built out their entire Latin America distribution business. that business ended up being a very big business, at least for me. And then I exited it and went to a new emerging market, which is cannabis private equity and venture capital. And so I invested first in 2014 into this fund and then a series of other funds and investments, and then finally came on as a partner because I think this is just another generational wealth creation event. And then while all that's been happening, I'm just a curious human, and I get a little fired up thinking about what's happening to employees and to small business owners in the US right now. And so I was talking about this with some of my friends and said, what could we do to teach more people how to do what we know how to do, which is business acquisition, M&A, and do it on small businesses, because there are millions, 2.5 million small businesses right now that are looking for buyers. And if you've walked down any main street, I mean, you're in DC, you can walk down any main street and see 1 out of 4 businesses, small businesses are shuttered. And these are permanent shutterings. And so how could we prevent that from happening except by going out and teaching more people to get in before the business owner can't handle it anymore, and provide some new capital and some new interests in moving that business forward. And oh, by the way, you can use future sales in order to fund a lot of business acquisitions. So it doesn't just have to be big PE funds and VC funds like ours that come in and buy. It can be, it's not for everybody. There is hard work there, but it can be a lot more people than it is now. And if that happened, we'd all be feeling a lot better about where the economy was. So we're trying to do our little part.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely got a history and track record of kind of skating to where the puck's going to be, identifying the trend before hopefully, everyone else catches on, like what you did in South America, what you've done in cannabis, now what you're looking to do in the small business world. What do you think is the commonality or the kind of the common thread between all of those areas?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, I think, like all entrepreneurs, I'm always curious, and I'm looking for what is the next thing that's going to develop growth. But I think the other part is I have a newsletter called Contrarian Thinking, and I talk about contrarian arbitrage on it, which is basically what is everybody saying? So what's the common narrative? And then if instead I apply like common sense to it, does it make sense to me? And usually there's a huge gap between what everybody is saying and what the reality is. And so, for cannabis, the contrarian arbitrage was, wait a second, double-digit people are continuing to consume cannabis each year on an increasing level, and yet it's federally illegal and there's no money in the system. I'm not a rocket scientist, but at some point that's going to come to a head. I want to be there before it legalizes. And with the small businesses, it was the same thing. It was like, how come nobody knows how to do this? And, my Uncle Eb, he had a plumbing business that did millions of dollars in revenue. And he actually just passed away last week. And he didn't even know that he could sell the business. So he wound down an entire business that he could have sold for probably millions of dollars, at least using even his future sales. But he didn't do it because he didn't know how. So I'm not that smart. I just am like, wait, narrative is this, and commonsensically, shouldn't there be a solution? And finding that arbitrage opportunity in between, I think I learned in journalism, and I applied it to business.
I feel like this happens in a lot of areas in life, especially right now, not just business, but why do you think it is that this groupthink sometimes can be so pervasive, even amongst like people that are probably, regarded as experts? Like why is it that, just the masses just miss out on some of these opportunities that, to someone like you look fairly, clear, visible?
Obvious, yeah. Well, one, to the first Indians go the first arrows, right? So I don't even know if we could say that these days. I'd probably get in trouble.
We're gonna get canceled.
Yeah, we're gonna get canceled. But I think there is true to the whoever the first explorers are. There's lots of naysayers, and so because a lot of us operate really from we want people to like us instead of we want to be respected. I'm perfectly fine if you don't like me, but you're going to have a hard time not respecting at least some of the things that I've done. And so but that was hard. I mean, that took me a while, Dan. And I mean, you were a military guy, and I feel like you guys get so used to that. You know, my husband, he could care less if you liked him or not. For me, that took me years and years to get comfortable with. But I think first it's that when you're out there in front saying things that is not common narrative yet, and especially saying things that take some thinking about, people don't like it. You know, people have never through history as humans, you don't want to stand out from the herd, because when you stand out from the herd, you get into trouble. You know, and you know, we as humans, we started out a lot more violently than we are today. And so I think that's just ingrained in us. So one, people want to be liked. It's hard to be liked when you're challenging the status quo or the common narrative. And then on top of that, there's a lot of negative feedback loops. So, you know, if you're early on something, they're going to be right for a period of time. You know, I can't tell you, when I got into cannabis, some of my biggest mentors at like KKR, Carlyle, you know, Blackstone, the big firms were like, Codie, you're ruining your career. You're ruining your career. You'll never be able to come back to traditional firms. You have a great track record with names like Goldman and, you know, MBA from Georgetown on it. And now you'll never be able to come back. And I was like, you are going to call me in 2 to 3 years and ask to invest and or buy my business. And, you know, they were like, that's cute. No. And so it took some, you know, we say in Spanish, some huevos to like get out there and get comfortable with that. But I think that's why. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think people like to think they're contrarian or rebelling against the system, but only like if they have safety and numbers. So there's just very few people that are truly willing to do it first. I do think the desire to be liked plays a part in it, and I think the loss aversion also plays a
Totally.
part in it. Like, you know, people will take bigger risk just to not be wrong. I think there's been tons of studies that show that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, one of my partners in the cannabis fund at Entourage Effect Capital, he has been a long time tech investor. And he said, you know what it's like being a tech investor that's at the forefront? It's like opening the door and running through a dark black room, and only when you open the next door in front of you do the lights flip on behind you, and everybody else sees the door that you were running towards the entire time. But then you get into the next room and it's a black room again, and then everybody thinks you're crazy until you get to the next door, and then the lights flip on. And I kind of liked that analogy. I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, I know personally, I mean, even just in talking about micro business acquisition and the fact that you can use non-traditional funding sources, AKA you don't have to be a multimillionaire to do this. People are like, that's not true. No, you can't. And then we're going to do a live buy a business event, because I'm like, you guys, not only is it true, but I've done it multiple times. So it's not like every time somebody's going to do the deal that you want them to do. You got to kiss quite a few frogs, but is it possible? 1000%. And I was just talking with the CEO of Flippa, which is an online marketplace where you can buy and sell online businesses. And he has case study after case study of, you know, small businesses that were bought by people who never thought they could buy a business. And then simultaneously of sellers, like he has one example of this lady, Karen, and I loved this story. And she was retiring. So she was in her 60s or 70s, and she owned like Crochet Karen or KarenCrochet.net or something. And
It's an interesting time to have a business with Karen in the name, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Good thing she sold it a few years
Yeah.
ago, poor thing. Or maybe be more valuable today. People would like want to watch Karen's angrily crochet. But she had this business. It had some revenue that came from like affiliate links and selling some stuff. And she just listed it. She didn't know. And she was able to sell the business for $90,000. And $90,000 to her at retirement changed her entire retirement. I mean, that set her up to actually be able to retire completely differently. And so, like, these stories are everywhere, but for some reason, people don't want to think they can be an owner, and maybe other people don't want you to think you can be an owner. I don't know.
Interesting. And I know we're going to dive into the small business acquisition a lot, but before we kind of go there, I want to stick with the cannabis for a minute or
Yeah.
two. It sounds like you took some flack or resistance up front. Uh, was there a moment, after that, like a year later, 2 years later, where you were like, you know, now, like I'm right, and here's the proof, or like, what was that feeling like? Was there a moment where it was just obvious that you made the right call on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we first returned all of our investors' money plus in Fund One, in the quickest amount of time that I've ever seen a private equity fund return capital, that felt really good. I kind of don't believe things until you show me the money, and you see that they actually work. So the fact that that worked, I was like, okay, here we go. And then when our first company listed for $1 billion on the stock exchange, that was pretty cool. And then when we had like 5 or 6 companies that were all worth $1 billion, I was like, well, that's also cool. And then I think when we started to get some like bigger investors, multi-million-dollar investors, that was cool. And I think those were all parts of it. And then the other part that's interesting is, we just started to get a ton of attention. So, I've never had a PR agent. I've never paid somebody to do marketing for me or to get me on, media or shows or whatever. And we started getting all of this outreach and, being seen as experts in the space. And that almost more than anything cinched it for me, because I was like, yes, we're getting results. And also we're able to spread this message to more and more people, which is going to help more of our portfolio companies and normalize it. But besides that, I can't think of like one individual moment, except maybe like standing on a few stages where there's like 25,000 people in the crowd and you're explaining to them the cannabis opportunity, and they come up afterwards and we're like, I used to think that cannabis was a bunch of, stereotypical stoners. And now I understand something completely different, and that this could be an institutional market. And so I think that's just going to accelerate. I mean, the big moment for me is going to be when I know what I know will happen, which is that, some sort of banking reform is going to happen, and eventually it'll be descheduled, it'll be decriminalized, and it'll be legalized. And then we're going to look very smart. And I feel very confident in that happening, as opposed to sometimes in a company, you're like, I think this is going to be successful. As an industry, I did bet my bottom dollar that it would be. So we'll see.
And I know just from previous discussions and with you, Fund Two has, you did the second fund that closed out. Now you're in the middle of starting the third fund, correct?
Yeah. So when we talk publicly as private equity and venture capital investors, it's a little funny. We have to be careful and talk
Oh
about it as a
shit!
fund family.
All right,
No, you're
sorry.
all good.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
if I broke some SEC rule or.
No, not at all.
Okay.
You're golden. You can talk about whatever you
Okay.
want, but we talk about it as a fund family. And it's really, it's like goes back to these rules to protect accredited and qualified investors. But yes, we're actively, investing in companies and doing deals, and that part is always super interesting.
Gotcha. And what's your if you're allowed to say, like what's
Yeah,
your
exactly.
industry outlook right
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
Like obviously you've done well, but is it too late, right? Or is there more
Yeah.
is there more runway still on this thing?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but I mean, it's interesting. When we were investing in the other funds, if you were to look at the stock market return in the cannabis sector, it was at all-time highs, right? And there was definitely a lot of frothiness in the market, and we knew that. And so we put in some provisions to make sure we invested in companies that were thoughtfully moving forward, and we were at good valuations, or if they weren't at good valuations, we had provisions to pull back some money if they didn't hit the milestones they said they were going to. And so, previous to now, you've gotten into the cannabis market, but at really high valuations, right? Because it's this massive growth industry. And now the industry is at some of the lowest valuations that we've ever seen. And that's because there was a big reset that happened from like early Q2 of last year to now, where the entire market really cratered. And so that's created a lot of what we see as opportunity in the market to go out and acquire and invest in companies that are still growing, that have like great growth numbers, but they don't have the capital to fund the growth. And so in a market where everything else is at all-time highs, I think this one's an interesting play at a possibly very devalued level. And so we're very bullish on the cannabis market, and particularly the private company side, because valuations are great and consumers are, well, they're consuming.
And what's the process there, as the investor? Are you like combing through hundreds of these companies, kind of seeing which ones are run the best, but just need more of the professional operational skills plus
Yeah.
capital, or how do you kind of pick the ones, and are there a lot of them out there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of deals. Not all deals are good deals. We tend to invest in companies that are doing 10 or 20 million plus in revenue, or have an unfair advantage. Like, let's say that, a former, CEO or something of InBev is starting a cannabis company and using the entire ecosystem and structure of InBev or Constellation Brands. That we might do at a lower revenue level. But for the most part, we're investing in these what we call growth equity stage companies. So they're already doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but they need more money to scale their growth. And maybe they haven't operationalized well on some parts of their businesses, but there are sort of two types of companies we invest in. One are these platform plays, which are like really strong companies that do that $20 million and above, that we can help do add-ons and strategic M&A in order to create what we think will be the biggest companies in cannabis that will be bought out by strategics as legalization happens. So we try to get these companies to like 50 or $100 million in revenue. And then also we're looking at distressed deals where the companies aren't, for some reason or another, there's a valuation opportunity where they can be priced better. And maybe they're running out of capital, or maybe they were poorly managed in some way, but they still have great sales. And so we can essentially recapitalize them, bring in an operating partner to run them with us, and then take those companies and turn them into platform companies, or add them on to our platform companies. So those two things are what we do. And we're very actively involved with our companies, which I think is a differentiator in the space.
And what's the commonality between this and just small business in general that kind of allowed you to, see the opportunity over there and to start, transitioning,
That's a good
transitioning into
question.
that market?
Yeah, so I think, well, so I started doing the unconventional acquisitions is the name of that business. And we started doing that basically as a passion play. We really did it because we want to get people back to work, and we think what's happening to small business is criminal. And, my husband is getting out of the military, fellow Naval Academy grad like you. And he and a lot of his friends are want to operate and run companies. And, it's a stereotype, but I think, a lot of military guys are great at coming into a system that's already in existence and operationalizing it and creating hierarchy and structure and process. And so we are just helping people one-off do this. And anytime I'm helping enough people one-off do something, I try to create a course or a guide or a blog or something on it, because I can't replicate myself indefinitely. And so that's how it started was, these guys were wanting help buying businesses. And I know how to buy businesses in a couple different industries. And so we were helping them. And then in order to do that, we bought a couple businesses. And so then I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. We bought a couple businesses in this space, and we are now like cash flowing off of these businesses. And once I bought a few, then I started getting a ton of deal flow. So we started investing in more businesses, and then that just sort of rolled along. And then I met Ryan at GoBundance years ago. I was talking about this on his podcast, not dissimilar to this. And, he told me that he had made, some of these courses and had built out this infrastructure for his businesses. And so I was like, well, why don't you do this with me? Because I don't have a lot of time to do it, but I can tell you the content and the right way we should put the content together. And if you know how to do all the back end operations, great. And then we'll donate a bunch of the profits to charity and get more people employed. So a little virtuous circle was the idea.
And what kind of businesses did you start off buying? One, and the second part of this question is, how did you find them? Like, was it through a broker or word of mouth, marketing?
Yeah. So the first, well, I've been buying businesses for a while, so we have a few, but we've bought. There's sort of like three categories that I like when it comes to businesses. So I like professional services, so B2B, selling services to other businesses. I like services that you sell to consumers, and then I like what's called sort of structured systems. And what I mean by that, some people say this is like SaaS, but I don't really buy SaaS companies. It's a little above my pay grade from a tech perspective. But what I mean by that are businesses like online courses, e-products, IP on books or information. So we buy those kind of businesses and then plug them into our ecosystem. And so I've bought, bought into a podcast production company. That one, there's an operator that actually runs it. I just gave him money and take a rev share. I bought into a laundromat, a couple laundromat businesses. We've bought land, small amounts of land in order to put campers on them. It's a weird little deal.
I think I saw that one in the last newsletter, right? Like you're buying camp land that you use as campsites near national parks.
Yeah, exactly. We went on a trip to Zion and stayed on one of these like campsites that doubles as a cattle ranch. And it's near Zion, and because all the Zion places got closed down for COVID, and then the national campsites were all booked. So we couldn't figure out where to go. Our friend got smart on it, and we ended up staying at one. Didn't think anything of it until another girlfriend of mine told me that she buys these campsites, or they're like an acre of land in sort of areas near national parks or near cool camping, areas. And she's like, yeah, I buy acres for like 10K. And then I put them on Airbnb and HipCamp. And I add like maybe a fire pit or some like little touches to them. And I have somebody else operate and manage them. And I make like $1,500 a month for a $10,000 investment. And I was like, wait a second, let me do the math. The return on that is ridiculous from a percentage standpoint on a yearly basis. And then we did some like.
Wait, but that was monthly though?
Monthly.
Oh, wow. So that's, because 15% a year would be pretty good, but that's 15%,
Yeah.
that's 15% a month, huh?
Yeah, that's 180% return in a year. Now, mind you, that's gross, right? So no costs in it. I imagine there's costs that are associated with, I haven't listed mine yet, but whatever costs Airbnb takes or HipCamp takes, or if there's a Stripe collection fee, and then whatever you charge your property manager. But even if say all you make is, I don't know, $500 or $1,000 a month, your break even is so soon and quick that I liked that idea. So we invested in some of those. And really the only way that I got to do this is my husband got out of the military and had some time. And so before he took on a job, he started making some of these acquisitions that I told him how to do. And then I was like, man, anybody could do these if they were driven and knew the process. Let's process it out.
Wow, that's insane. I mean, just I read it in the newsletter, and just hearing it again, like that much per month is crazy. Like even if it dries up in 6 months because campsites open back up, you pretty much own the land free and clear at that point.
Exactly. And then it's kind of cool because then you own, I mean, and so here's the things you got to look out for. What is the zoning allowance? What is the sewage management allowance? Do you need to have some sort of system set up for bathrooms? Some sites you don't, some sites you do. Is there a property tax that's high in that area, or is there a land tax that's high? And so there are some, but all of this stuff is, you can chat with a real estate agent, and then, like any of the businesses that I'm doing, the one thing I don't like about this is you can't really use debt. You have to have 10K to put down, right? I think you can get land, you can get debt on land, but it's just harder.
It's very hard. Yeah. I've looked into it for some hunting land, and it's like it's not hard. I mean, it's hard to get the financing compared to what I'm used to.
Exactly. Even in this environment with rates. So you do have to put the cash down, which I didn't love. And that's why I like buying into some of these small businesses, because, if we buy a laundromat and the laundromat does 60 to 9, let's just say 60K to make it easy. Let's say the laundromat does 60K profit. You buy businesses based on their profit in the small business range, not based on their revenue, which is different for us in the, private equity venture space. We buy based on revenue, not profit always. And so if you buy them based on profit, the typical multiplier is if a business is worth 60K in profits, you buy it for 2 to 3x. And so you could just pay, you could pay $180. But better than that would be to go to the seller and say that you want to do seller financing and use future sales to pay over the course of 3 years. And you'd be surprised how many businesses allow that. And so we do a lot of deals like that, or we do a lot of value added deals where I'll say, we already own this and we're going to help you with that, like marketing or client acquisition or whatever. So I want a percentage of your company for that. I'll put in some capital. But typically on those, you're like break even 1 month or 2 months in, but you have to already have an ecosystem to do that. Like you could do that with a lot of businesses, but maybe everybody listening would have to start with straight up seller financing.
And what's the what's the risk of like, I assume a lot of these businesses you buy and look at don't have a ton of people, all right? And so maybe there's a lot of key man risk, or the owners heavily involved. How do you account for that when you're evaluating companies?
Yeah. So in the cannabis business, that's everything. It's a total people play, especially at that level. You have a lot more assets to work with there. So that's gives you more wiggle room, and they're more likely to succeed because they're doing 10 or $20 million in revenue and probably, a decent amount of profit. With the small businesses, I typically, if I buy them straight out, I need an operator to go in on them because I just don't have time with my main business to actually operate these businesses. I just own a percentage of them. And the best way to find operators, like if you're in our group, Dan, and so in the mastermind, you'll see one of my friends, Lisa Song, she's a genius about finding operating partners for her businesses. So basically she has an alcohol-filled cupcake business. I know. And in Vegas, so it works great. So she has that business. She owns a Christie's real estate franchise, and she owns a bunch of mail pack and ship centers. She has a few other smaller businesses, but let's say those are her top 3 businesses. And she has operators that run all 3 of those. She doesn't run them. She just ran for office, actually, which shows you how much time she had. But what she does is she goes to her group of friends. She always chooses operators from her friends. She looks at who her friends are and thinks like, who are the hustlers or like the former athletes in college or people who are underemployed, but like successful at being, underemployed, or people who are even not underemployed. They're doing well, but they want to be an owner instead of an employee. So she chooses the devil she knows from her network and pulls them in as operators. And so for the mail pack and ship centers, I think those make like 50 or 60K profit each year. So not giant, but she brought in one of her friends who was a cocktail waitress. And in Vegas, cocktail waitresses can make a lot of money, but you don't want to do that forever. And you want to be an owner at some point. And so she pulled one of them out that was, a real grinder and worked a ton of hours and had saved up. And Lisa took all the cash risk, and her friend took all the operational sweat equity risk. And then she structured sort of a 3-year vested equity schedule for her to earn equity for working in the business. And so that's the model that I take, is I bring in operators to run almost everything, or I invest in companies that already have an operator.
And does the owner, the previous owner, the seller, do they ever stay on or have an earnout, or how does that ever happen?
Yeah, totally. Depends on what type of business. If they are a seller that is looking to sell, I typically don't let them stay on for a long, there's a transition plan. They can stay on to get some cash revenue if they want, and we structure it that way, but I wouldn't trust them to run the business. So if they're already up for sale, that means you got to create some sort of operational transition plan, because their mind is already out of running that business, right? The second that you figure out the way that you're going to structure the cash payout, they're going to pull back. But if it's a business that's not up for sale, for instance, my partner Ryan is looking right now at an accounting firm, and this accounting firm, the guy's running, he's growing, he's doing his accounting firm. And Ryan basically said, we should have you operate a few more accounting firms. Let's do some M&A and buy some other accounting firms. I'll show you how to do it. I'll structure the deal, whatever. You operate all of them. you take a bigger cut of the deal, but I'm going to take a cut of the revenue because I'm going to help you bring these deals and operationalize them. Then I'm going to back out. And so you can run it a couple different ways. The typical way for like a brand new person, if you've never bought a business before, or you've never run or built a business, is to keep it cleaner, and you're going to be the operator. But there's typically like 3 different ways they do it. There's like the investor, which would be like me or Ryan. We come in, give capital or give access or something. And then there's the person who's looking for supplemental income. They have like, so they're probably like a part-time executor or business operator. And then there's the replace your job, and that's full-time operator. And they want to go and run this business instead, or a few of them. So there's definitely different ways you can structure it.
Do you think this is a time period because of, you know, the amount of small businesses that are owned by baby boomers and the lockdown, that there's like a great buying opportunity now, but it could go away if bigger companies start playing in this space? Or do you think that they have that interest ever, or what's the deal there? Because you probably saw that in the cannabis, right? Like,
yeah, I do think that here's the difference. These micro businesses like small laundromats and mail centers and accounting firms, this already exists, these roll-ups or PE investing of them at a higher level. So once you get into $10 million in revenue, private equity firms are all over you, and they're looking to buy you in varying ways, because that's how those guys become billionaires, is they roll up companies and sell them. That's private equity 101. But they need scale. They're not good at taking a company that's only doing 60K profit and taking it all the way to where they need it and to scale it. It's really very similar, I think, to real estate in a lot of ways. You saw the Blackstones, like they don't go and buy individual properties for the most part. They buy pools of property, right? Like, so groups of them put together. And that's the same thing that is in this world, except buying businesses, it's not as easy of a template, right? Like in buying real estate, it's kind of like, here's the mortgage, here's what it costs, here's the IRR, here's the cap rate. Like it's been commoditized somehow. But buying businesses has not been commoditized yet. And when you own a house, yes, there's some property management stuff that you need on top of it, or a series of houses, but that property management aspect is always kind of the same. When you have a business, it's different. It's just, businesses are changing. You got to keep evolving. So I think we'll have quite a while before this becomes completely commoditized. But I do think right now in particular, we have a unique valuation opportunity, but I don't think it's something that you only have for the next year, for instance.
Gotcha. Well, this has been great. We're going to run out of time soon. Before that happens, I want to make sure we get to the HyperFast round if you're ready for some rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
All right. What's your biggest piece of advice to a new investor? It could be, someone that's investing in anything.
Don't have FOMO. Be more cautious, be happier about the bad deals you've passed on than the good deals you got into. So it's okay to go slow.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever you miss out on like a good deal or a good property, something better comes along.
Yep.
What's the biggest challenge you've ever had in business, and how did you overcome it?
This is going to sound a little ridiculous, but I think the biggest challenge I've ever had in business is actually stepping up and into my own belief in myself. It took me I was an employee for a long time. There's nothing wrong with that. Employees are great, but I know that I'm not the type to be a great employee. I'm just not. And it took me a long time to say, I'm going to go and figure out how to do this by myself. I've never been the type to come up with like $1 billion business idea. Like, oh man, I know I'm going to create YouTube and then I'm going to do it. I'm not that. And so that's why buying businesses for me was perfect, because I could buy my revenue that would protect my income stream. So my biggest challenge was getting out of that employee mindset, that, constrained mindset, and being like, we're just going to figure it out and we're going to do it ourselves, and you're capable.
If you could go back in time and take the knowledge, experience that you have now, what would you tell yourself from, from when you were starting out?
I mean, one, God, I mean, I think investing early is so important. And I'm sure you wish this too. I wish I would have started building and buying businesses a billion years ago. Like I would take, if somebody said, Codie, you could have $100 million right now and be 60 or even 50, or Codie, you have $0 and none of the success you've made, but you'd go back and be 10 or 15. I'd go back and be a 10 or 15 any day, because the knowledge that I have now on how to go and scale is a game changer. And so, I think I do spend a lot right now on learning, but I wish I would have spent more earlier. I wish I would have spent more on getting more revenue streams, because it just allows you to focus on the stuff you want to focus on. And you can't really hide passion, even if you try to for a long time. That's, I think, why people get depressed or sick or alcoholics or whatever. It's like you're beating yourself down into a life that you probably shouldn't be in. So I'd say, like, start earlier, start building, start thinking like an acquirer, and read and follow people that do that. And so it's good that they're listening to this show, because they're already getting that.
When you're not buying businesses or doing cannabis funds or all that good stuff, what would we find you doing?
I'm really actually enjoying like a little bit more downtime and less travel now. So I think the biggest thing I'm doing now is like working out, surfing, open water swims, spending time with a little pup. We tend to be pretty active outside. But that being said, I'm kind of a nerd. My favorite thing to do is to think about this. What are different ways to play this game of business? So maybe I'd be doing that more over a glass of wine and not getting up at 4:30 in the morning and getting up at 8 instead. I don't know.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Ooh, God, this question's so hard.
Everybody got it wrong 5 years ago.
Yeah, so. I know. Actually, that is true. Who knows? I want to do more of this. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I hope to see is that we had a huge exit in cannabis, and that it's legalized, and we've been sort of vindicated on that and all the benefits that'll come from it. And then I want us to own a bunch of really cool businesses. And you know what I really want in 5 years? I need to become way better at operationalizing all of my businesses. And so that's what I'd like to be, is really have gotten to the level where I'm like, man, these systems and processes all work. We get to oversee them and just think about the cool stuff, as opposed to be in the business grinding as much as we are. And candidly, I'm, even today, I'm not there yet. We're really involved in a lot of our businesses. But I think one day we'll be able to sort of set them up to step back a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you for playing the HyperFast round. Well, really two last questions. One, can you tell the listeners out there a little bit about your course on buying businesses? I just joined the mastermind, so I'm looking forward to that. But just tell everyone out there what that is, how that works, and where they can find it.
Yeah. So it's called unconventionalacquisitions.com, or howtobuyasmallbusiness.com. And essentially what it is there's a course that you can go through that's that's a lot of content. That's basically hours of, templates on how to buy a business and what the market is and how to figure out if you want to buy a business and what type of business. And the goal by the end of it is that everybody that goes through it should be able to walk away, and after, let's call it 90 days of taking the course, be able to actually really go buy their own first business. And I think, we've only been live for like 4 or 5 weeks, but we've already seen 5 or 6 deals get done through people in the group, which is really cool to hear about. And it's teaching me that it's rationalized. Like, a lot of people can do this. There's a repeatable model. So if you want to sign up for the course, that's an option. And then if you want to sign up for the mastermind, that's for people who are really serious about buying a business. And that is access to Ryan and I and people like you, and we all are in there talking about building and buying businesses. And so those are the 2 options, and you can sort of dive into a bunch of information there. And then if you go to contrarianthinking.substack.com, that's my newsletter. That one's free, has stuff on cannabis, has stuff on buying businesses. And if you like what you see there, then get into the course and start executing instead of consuming.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the course. Hopefully a lot of people check it out. One last question. If people want to get in touch with you or stay connected, I know you mentioned the newsletter already, but is there any other way that people can connect?
Yeah, I think the best is probably Instagram. I'm Codie Sanchez, CODIE SANCHEZ. So check out Instagram. And the other one is contrarianthinking.substack.com. That's the most content heavy one, as opposed to if you just want to see my face, waving from Instagram, and whatever my daily rant is there. So I think those are the two spots I would go.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show, Codie. It's been a blast. And thank you, everyone, for watching, listening, however you're getting this great content. And we will see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you want to see more videos like this, click right here. And if you're new to the channel, click below to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out. And let me know in the comments what you think about the videos. I'll see you next time.